morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Young Lives Ethiopia, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our official launch of our report, Experience of Young Lives During Crisis in Ethiopia, Initial Evidence from the 6 Wave of Qualitative Research, widely known as Qual 6. My name is Brian. I'll be facilitating this program with Dr. Getahun Tolessa, and we are delighted to have such a distinguished group of participants with us today. Senior government officials, government partners, researchers, practitioners, and colleagues from across sectors. And to begin with, it's my honor to invite Dr Alula Pankhurst, Young Lives Ethiopia Country Director, to deliver the introduction and welcome remark.
Good morning. It's really a pleasure and an honor to welcome you all here, and I'm very impressed everybody is so punctual. I'm going to first ask Your Excellencies, the Ambassador of Ireland, Olivia Leslie, and Amanda McLoughlin from the FCDO of the UK to come and join me on the podium, because after my speech we'll go straight into their presentation. So I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of an overview about Young Lives and then the qualitative 6th wave of research that we are presenting today. Young Lives is the largest and most comprehensive mixed method longitudinal study of poverty and inequality in the global south. We've been following 12,000 children from 2000, from when they were born in each country, right from infancy through to adulthood in 4 countries, in Ethiopia, in India, in Peru and Vietnam, since 2002. So we're talking about a longitudinal study over 2.5 decades, 25 years. And our mission is to deliver policy-relevant research on the causes and consequences of poverty, gender inequalities, and how that affects the lives of children and young people, particularly in a context of what we might call polycrises, all kinds of series of crises that accumulate and through which young people transitioning to adulthood have had to go. We partner locally with the Policy Studies Institute in Ethiopia and internationally through many partners to shape meaningful research engagement in trying to help the process of bringing about significant policy change. Our approach is very wide and broad and holistic across a range of different areas. So we focus on health and well-being, but also education and skills. And as the children grow up, what we focus on changes. So very early on it was nutrition, and as the children moved into school it became education, and now then the transition from learning to earning, from school to work, so employment, but then they begin to have relationships, form families, have children. So we're looking at the life course approach to studying children. It's quite a complex design. I hope you can you see the screen here? Shall I turn it a little bit like that? So we have 2 cohorts, and this is very important because it enables us to compare over time, because we have a 7-year gap between the cohorts. So the younger cohort were age 1 at the first survey in 2002. And there have been 7 surveys up to now, the last one in 2024, when the younger cohort were 24. Now then, the younger cohort were already age 7-8 when we started in the first round. And you see here, you can see that they're growing up 8 all the way now to 31 in the 7th round. And this means that we can compare at age 8 across the 2 cohorts, and then again at age 12, and again at age 15, and at age 19. And what does this mean? This means, for instance, that we can show very clearly that access to education has increased, but there have been problems with a decline in quality. Just as one example, that comparison really gives us very, very important evidence. And for instance, today we'll be talking that we'll be able to prove that child marriage has actually decreased between the cohorts. In addition to the 7 surveys, we've had more in-depth qualitative research because it's a mixed method study, and this gives us the opportunity to hear from the young women and men themselves, from them when they were girls and boys, what their aspirations were as they would grow up. And over 6 rounds, we've talked to them about their lives. And so the first round of wave of qualitative research was in 2007, and the latest one, the one we're talking about today, in March 2025. In addition, we have done specific policy-relevant thematic studies on orphans and vulnerable children, on the safety nets, on child labor, on violence affecting children, on urban relocation, 10 of them. So it is quite a complex design, but it means we can look at different aspects and see how health relates to education, how safety nets relates to employment, etc. Now, in terms of the Young Lives sites, we have 20 sites in 7 different regions in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, Amara, Oromia, Tigray, and in the southern region, now Sidama, in the southwest and the central southern region. And we've had a Pro-4 focus with more sites in food insecure areas and where there's urban poverty. And we've been focusing the younger cohort 2,000, born in 2001, so around 25 years old, and the 1,000, the older cohort, born in 95 approximately, who are now 31 years old. Now, the qualitative sites, and you see here, you can see the sites, the 20 sites, plus the school survey sites that we did also in Afar and Somali. The qualitative sites that we're talking about now are 7 in Addis Ababa, Amara, Sidama, Oromia, and Tigray. Now, the last quantitative round, the 7th round survey, 2024, had some really innovative data collection approaches. So there were the standard household questionnaires: socioeconomic status, migration, education, work, time use, health, well-being, nutrition, etc. But in addition, we had a self-administered questionnaire where the young people themselves can talk in a very innovative way with, which we called Akazi, audio computer assisted interviews. So they had headphones and tablets, and they could talk very sensitive questions about violence, about conflict, about rape, whatever, with drug use, etc., in a confidential manner. And we were able to prove that people felt more confident by piloting that this actually worked. And then a very innovative approach was the use of hair samples to measure stress cortisol levels. So that meant we could triangulate between the survey data, the in-depth experience through the qualitative data, and the objective measures through the hair samples. So watch this space. There'll be interesting information coming out. And then the RACER, the tablet-based cognitive skills, measuring foundational cognitive skills such as working memory. Now that sounds very abstract, but we were able to show that children in families that received safety net, PSNP support, particularly for several rounds, had better results in memory than those who didn't, which is fantastic evidence for the flagship program. Anthropomorphic measurements, which means we can relate the weight, height, waist circumference to all kinds of other variables. And of course, reading comprehension tests. And it's important to stress that Young Lives has had extremely low attrition, less than 1% per year over this very long period from 2001 to 2024. And in round 7, we interviewed a total of 2,231 students. Now, globally, we've been very much engaged in translating research to policy impact in a lot of different areas. I'm not going to go into them in any detail, but there were quite a lot of publications around the theme of climate change, and Young Lives has now got even a climate hub in the University of Oxford. A lot on mental health, working with WHO and so forth. Many publications on and research on social protection and safety nets, much on reducing child marriage. This is a law in India, and that was changed through Young Lives evidence, and so we'll be talking about that a lot. A lot on women, employment, childcare, and there are many, many briefs on the website that you can access. I'm not going to go into it due to a shortage of time. And then we were involved in establishing a forum called the Youth and Women Research and Practice Forum, which has been going for 15 years. Many of you are members. It was established in 2010. We held the 15th year anniversary workshop. The proceedings have already run out. They were on the table. And we partnered very closely with the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs. I'm very happy that Dr Getahun is here to give a speech. Previously the Ministry of Women, Children and Youth, and closely working with UNICEF and other international organizations and NGOs, really to discuss, to have a forum where government, researchers, international organizations, donors, government partners, etc., can come together, NGOs, to discuss policy issues and bring out. The ministries have also presented their evidence, and this happens the last Thursday of every month for 15 years it's gone on, and there are 13 annual summaries which are on the website and 35 newsletters with a membership of around 1,500. So coming to today and the Qual objectives, the transitions of adulthood into adulthood in a time of polycrisis. So there was COVID, and then there was the conflict in northern Ethiopia, drought and climate change, inflation, underemployment, unemployment, displacement, and so forth. So we wanted to bring about policy-relevant insights, how young people's lives are changing, especially in a context of crisis, and how this affects their health and well-being. So, you remember we had the two cohorts. The older cohort went through to adulthood before all these crises happened. The younger cohort were transitioning through adolescence to adulthood in the middle of all these crises, polycrises. So we were wanting to analyze the changes since the fifth qualitative round in 2019, before all this happened, and also relate it to the quantitative evidence of the last round, just 1 year earlier. And then, of course, assessing the changes to services. So the key topics on health and well-being, FGMC early marriage, mother and child health, sexual reproductive health, mental health disability, we were talking a lot about that, but relating these to other aspects of livelihood, education, transitions to work, underemployment, not just unemployment, but underemployment, and of course, very, very importantly, the increasing trends in migration. So for our sampling, we had a longitudinal sample in Addis Ababa, Oromia, Sidama, Tigray, and a phone survey in Amhara, since we couldn't actually go there do face-to-face interviews. And to focus on the impact of conflict, we selected 2 sites in Tigray and 2 in Amhara, so over-representing that. And then we selected from round 7, I'll explain, also a big focus on migrants, to Addis Ababa from Amhara, to Mekelle from Tigray, migrants coming for education in universities. And then to get different perspectives, we used to talk to the parents, to the caregivers. But now many of them are married. So for those that have partners, we talk to the spouses, and then of course key informants, especially in the health sector, and focus group discussions by age. So how did we select the additional sample? Well, we looked, for instance, in terms of mother and child health, those who were pregnant a year earlier. What happened? Those who had a child before the age of 19, what happened to them over time? those who had underweight children. In SRH, those who had low scores showed lack of knowledge about contraception, intimate partner violence cases, mental health, high anxiety, depression, PTSD, mental stress. We selected from those. Disability, those unable to work, etc. And then we had these 30 modules, the core one to the respondents, the thematic modules by topic, the focus group by age and gender, and the key informants to get the perspective of local government, service providers, informal customary leaders, NGOs, etc., etc. And the process, obviously research clearance from Oxford, from the Ethiopian Society of Sociologists, Social Workers and Anthropologists, and then we worked with 11 researchers, most of them women, and the important thing was these were not only young men and women now who are established researchers who have got qualifications in social sciences, but they'd worked with us for many rounds, so they knew the young people and developed trust. We had interactive training sessions, and Sarah Barber from King's College was here, and Adiam Mulshah from Addis Ababa University, about interviewing mental health, with which we didn't have so much experience. And then the post-fieldwork debriefing allowed us as a team to come up with some of the key ideas that we are presenting today. So the sample, the index, young people, the spouses and caregivers, the key informants, the focus group discussions, with a total of about 500 respondents, above what we had planned. And our outputs, so today we're going to be presenting the experiences of young lives during crisis in Ethiopia, the report, and also Kafialo's accompanying literature review of health services and trends in health expenditures. These have been published and are on the website. And today, there's a draft policy brief for discussion. So on the tables, we will have a session where we'll be discussing that. We presented 8 papers at the International Conference of Ethiopian Studies in Hawassa, and there's a data gathering report as well. So our next steps, finalizing the policy brief from all the inputs and suggestions from this workshop. And then we're very, very grateful to FCDO and Irish Aid, who not only funded the research, but are now convinced that we need to dig deeper into the findings, but also to relate it to all the quantitative and qualitative research that we have over 25 years to look at migration experiences, work and unemployment, MCH and SRH, health services, mental health in times of crisis, and in particular relating it to these polycrises and people's livelihoods, humanitarian response, social protection, community-based health insurance, education, family formation and parenting. Thank you very much. So without further ado, let me pass on to Her Excellency Ambassador Olivia Leslie.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Dr. Pankhurst, for the warm welcome. Distinguished guests, Dr. Getahun, Chief Executive and Representative for Policy, Strategy, Studies and Research at the Minister of Women and Social Affairs, Wassie Lingerh, Senior Technical Advisor for Reproductive Health, Family Planning and Adolescent and Youth Health at the Ministry of Health. Good morning. Amanda McLoughlin, Development Director for FCDO Ethiopia, and my good friend, and delegates and representatives of government institutions, development partners, academia, and all key stakeholders. On behalf of the Government of Ireland and on behalf of my embassy here and my embassy team who are with me, I'm honoured to be invited to speak to this research launched by Young Lives Ethiopia. The first time I came across the Young Lives programme was when I was Ireland's Asia Director at our headquarters, and I became familiar with the research that we had funded previously in Vietnam. And since then I have been really impressed by the value of the Young Lives research, and I'm going to speak a little bit today about, I suppose, why we see such value in it, and why we want to be involved with Young Lives and involved with all of you, and also maybe some of the key some of the key points that we have seen arise from the research and how it has really impacted the landscape here in Ethiopia, as well as impacted other areas where we work with Ethiopia. I mean, to start, I want to give a huge congratulations to the team and to the University of Oxford on the completion of the 6th wave of qualitative research building. And this, you know, as Dr. Pankhurst says, really is not the culmination, one further step on 20 years of significant research and policy engagement. And one thing that I really want to point to this morning is the enthusiasm, the sustained enthusiasm of the Young Lives team and the field researchers in keeping up this research and following young people for over 20 years and building relationships with them over that period of time. My embassy, the Embassy of Ireland, we've been working in Ethiopia for 30 years, and we want to continue cooperation both with the government of Ethiopia and with other partners on a wide range of issues, including research that informs policy. And I think that that's what today you're going to be exploring, is how can the research, the valuable research that you have conducted, really inform policy. And the research we'll be looking at today aligns very much with our own commitment to research and learning. And our ambition in the embassy is to improve how we research and learn about development so that we can strengthen our capacity and that of our partners to design effective programs based on policy recommendations. And we believe that strong research outputs will enable learning and inform our public engagement and advocacy at the global level. And you pointed to some of the work to push this research to global level. And situating research and evidence centrally within our planning and reporting will create clearer links between knowledge generation and our programming. Over the past 25 years, Young Lives have generated research in diverse low and middle income countries, comparing outcomes for 12,000 young people whose lives have been followed from infancy through to early adulthood in Ethiopia, India, Peru and Vietnam. And our support for Young Lives began in 2015, and I think that in those 11 years since then, we have really seen the value of it, and that's why in collaboration with the FCDO we want to continue support into 2026, and we welcome our ongoing partnership on this. Led by the University of Oxford, working with the Policy Studies Institute, who we have worked with on other projects as well, we believe that Young Lives embodies a diverse team to ensure that local priorities inform all aspects of the work. Here, the study follows 3,000 young people located in 20 sites in 7 regions, and it's one of the few longitudinal studies that has collected data in Amhara and Tigray before, during and after periods of conflict and sustained crisis. And I think that that's something that really strengthens the output that you have been able to do this. The comparison between the two cohorts has enabled Young Lives to provide key insights on a wide range of topics, and I just want to mention a few of them now. In nutrition and health, documenting the long-term effects of childhood deprivations and the devastating impact of environmental shocks and of food insecurity. In education, the lasting impacts of preschool education, trends in increased secondary school enrolment and learning progress between cohorts, as well as issues relating to quality of education, technical and vocational education, and access to tertiary education. And also I wanted to mention gender dynamics, where documenting gender trajectories, particularly from early adolescence, when puberty triggers stricter social norms with lasting effects on employment, and the causes and consequences of early marriage and parenthood. From a global perspective, Young Lives evidence has been pivotal in showing that early childhood stunting can be reversed well beyond the first 1,000 days, even into late adolescence, and that physical recovery is linked to significant improvements in cognitive skills, educational outcomes, and the attainment of decent jobs. For the first time, the study has shown that all is not lost for young people who've experienced hardship in early childhood, that windows of opportunity for recovery and catch-up exist throughout adolescence and early adulthood, And this discovery is reshaping global nutrition initiatives. Young Lives here advocated for school feeding, including in preschools, now a national programme here, and I have no doubt that this programme contributed to the recent EDHS findings on reduced malnutrition. As has been said, Young Lives works very closely with government, including directly with the Ministry of Education on improving the rollout of the O-Class preschool programme, including on teacher training. As a mixed method study, Young Lives has also been able to delve deeper into trends identified through the surveys, through in-depth interviews with children as they grow up, gaining insights into their experiences. And I think this piece around developing relationships with these cohorts is an incredibly strong element of the research. And allows, I suppose, the researchers to talk even about quite sensitive issues like FGM and child marriage, and to have insights into those communities and inroads into engagement with those communities. Being on the ground for over 2 decades means that Young Lives has built a wide network of partnerships, working collaboratively at both the country level and internationally, and promoting the research to policy impact. The longitudinal study demonstrated the importance of early learning with effects lasting till school completion, and has informed a massive expansion of pre-primary education in Ethiopia, providing evidence on the long-term benefits of early education, strengthened teacher training, and supporting curricular development. Young Lives evidence has informed the delivery also of the government's flagship PSNP social protection programme, and this is a programme that the Irish government has heavily invested in since 2008. And thereby your research has also strengthened our ability to engage in our largest investment in Ethiopia. And your research has demonstrated that stunting can be reversed, and emphasising differences based on location and household circumstances under PSNP. In Ethiopia, Young Lives has collaborated with the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs in providing evidence and advice to inform the children's policy, and the policies and strategies on harmful traditional practices and on the worst forms of child labour. And this research, I know, has also worked on child labour in PSNP as well. And as Dr Pankhurst already mentioned, the Research to Practice Forum is a really important way of amplifying all this research with the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs, not just the monthly meetings, but also the research. And I think the full room here today, and the fact that people are coming in and extra chairs are having to be brought in, really demonstrates the reach of your forum, the reach of your research, and the depth of your partnerships. And that is why we feel there's great strength and great importance in continuing to support it. So just to wrap up, we believe that the 6th round research findings that will be presented this morning will ensure that young people's voices, aspirations and lived experiences inform policies and programmes. And these are vital to delivering the lasting positive change in times of crisis and building a fair and sustainable future for all in Ethiopia and informing research globally. So I wish you a successful event, and my thanks to everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Olivia. Good morning, everybody, and a special welcome to Dr Wassie Lingerh, Senior Technical Advisor for Reproductive Health, Family Planning and Adolescent and Youth Health in the Ministry of Health, and to Dr Getahun Tolessa, Chief Executive Officer representing for Policy, Strategy, Studies and Research at the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs, and of course to Her Excellency Olivia Leslie, and to Dr Alula Pankhurst for presiding over this study and this event this morning, and of course his whole team. It is a great privilege to be here to launch this latest wave of qualitative research. And such a wealth of, we're so happy to be associated with this project, with such a wealth of rich and deep research going back so many years that we're incredibly lucky to have access to. And now, more than ever, as Dr. Alula said in his opening remarks, it's important for us to have robust data on polycrises and multiplier effects to help to inform policy choices that we're making in very, very difficult circumstances and turbulent times. So very lucky to have this wealth of data that is being presented this morning. And we're really proud, the UK is really proud of our association with this project, as I mentioned, which stretches back 25 years, actually, beginning with DFID, as we were, until a few years ago, and now FCDO, of course, but I believe that we were there from the beginning. A colleague of mine, Susanna Moorhead, who went on to become ambassador in Ethiopia while she was in DFID headquarters, had the idea for a longitudinal study to follow children's experiences of poverty throughout the LBG era. And that eventually evolved to become what we see today in Young Lives. In terms of this event today, it does come at a really useful time for Ethiopia and for the UK's partnership with Ethiopia. Because we have really clear priorities that are for the long term. They are changing. The world is changing. But our priorities in Ethiopia continue to be to support development and humanitarian needs, drive economic reform and trade, advance climate resilience and clean growth, promote education and health, uphold human rights and good governance, and contribute to regional security and migration management. We have a high-level visitor visiting this weekend to underline and emphasise our continued commitment to all of those things for the long term. And a Young Lives study with its focus on understanding the lives and challenges of young people in Ethiopia directly aligns with these priorities, providing vital evidence to inform our shared efforts towards achieving them. Today's launch presents findings from the 6th qualitative wave of research, as mentioned, with almost 500 respondents from 7 sites in 5 regions carried out in 2025. And these findings provide policy-relevant insights into a wide range of interrelated topics in young people's livelihoods, health and well-being, as they've transitioned into early adulthood during a period of multiple crises, including COVID, climate change, conflicts, inflation and employment challenges. And as we've heard, the research focuses on 5 topics relating to health and well-being: FGMC and early marriage, maternal and child health, sexual reproductive health, disability and mental health. Young Lives has a holistic approach, and the report that you have in front of you presents initial findings on additional topics relating to access to services and livelihoods, including education, employment and migration. I'd like to just highlight a few of the key Young Lives findings that we found particularly interesting and useful. So firstly, child marriage is continuing to decline when comparing the 2 cohorts, which is obviously very good news and evidence that government policies with the support of development partners are achieving results. However, on the full Young Lives sample, almost 1 in 5, 19% of married women were married under the legal age of 18, highlighting the need for further interventions to ensure Ethiopia meets the targets set and international commitments. Secondly, mother and child health access to services has improved, and overall rates of parenting have declined. However, parents in the younger cohort became parents at a younger average age of 19 than those in the older cohort, highlighting the need for further action. This is consistent with the decline of the total fertility rate found in the recently launched Demographic Health Survey, which came out last week, and is a helpful comparator, which showed that total fertility rate dropped to 4.0, a steady decline from 5.5 in 2000. The Young Lives findings about improvement in services have also been shown in the Demographic Health Survey, which found that maternal mortality has dropped significantly to 141 per 100,000 births, and childhood mortality has also declined, with under 5 infants and neonatal mortality at 51, 39 and 25 per 1,000 live births respectively. This is something to celebrate. However, the Young Lives data suggests that services in rural areas, and especially regions affected by conflicts, have been challenged by the resurgence of home births, requiring strengthening and rebuilding local and community health systems. Next, sexual and reproductive health knowledge, including menstruation and contraceptive use, varies widely by gender, by location, with young people in rural areas and especially in conflict-affected regions facing constrained access to basic services, sometimes having to pay or forego services. Again, this is consistent with the Demographic Health Survey findings that found a slight decrease since 2016 from 36% to 35%, and massive regional variation, 50% in Sidama, 2% in Somali, 9% in Afar, 26% in Tigray, 51% in Addis Ababa. 35% of married women are using any contraceptives, 20% injectables, 10% implants, 2% the pill, and 15% of married and 40% of unmarried sexually active women have an unmet need for contraception. Misconceptions about fertility, male partner dominance, social stigma, and a desire to compensate for lives lost during conflict present major challenges requiring concerted action to ensure that SRH gains are not reversed. Next, on disability. Access to services among young people is affected by limited community-level services in rural areas, stigma, and low levels of trust, the preference for traditional healers and remedies, and increasing cost of healthcare and referrals for disabilities not covered by community-based health insurance. This suggests that the need for more action to promote greater inclusion and expansion of service provision at the community level. The importance of immunisation has been highlighted in the Demographic Health Survey too, and the Young Lives evidence of the debilitating long-term impacts of polio emphasises the need for further follow-up. Next, on mental health issues, we see that they're on the rise among the current generation, with multiple overlapping and cumulative crises affecting resilience of the younger generation. 6 of 10 young people reported experiencing at least moderate stress, and 1 in 5 reported symptoms of anxiety or depression, with symptoms much more pronounced in conflict-affected areas, unsurprisingly, highlighting the need to integrate and promote mental health services at a community level and address the trauma of war alongside livelihoods rehabilitation. Work and unemployment are major challenges affecting young people entering the labour market amid multiple crises. Young Lives found that young women are significantly more likely not to be working than young men, with additional unpaid domestic and care responsibilities coupled with limited workplace childcare and exposure to unsafe and risky work environments. Conflicts in northern Ethiopia further disrupted and continues to restrict economic activities in the post-conflict period. The findings highlight the need for interventions to promote job creation, improved workplace conditions, and the environment for entrepreneurship, small businesses, and women's access to the job market. Finally, migration is an increasingly common aspiration among young people, with half of those interviewed having migrated either within their country or internationally. Their reasons vary and include employment, education, marriage, and conflict, with differences observed across regions, locations, ages, and genders. International migration driven by unstable livelihoods causes young people to spend large sums, risking financial loss, harm, deportation, and even lives. Young women are especially vulnerable to exploitation and sexual harassment. The example of some successful migrants and the transformation of family lives through remittances continues to contribute to the increasing migration flows, highlighting the need to address the underlying cause by reducing poverty, expanding access to education, decent and meaningful employment, and strengthening governance to mitigate instability and prevent exploitation of migrants through brokers and traffickers. Which means that I end where I began. This is very much the focus of our ongoing partnership with Ethiopia. And in closing, I'd like to thank Young Lives Ethiopia once again for bringing us together. Every year that goes by makes Young Lives data research even more powerful, not just for those of us working here in Ethiopia and trying to find solutions to some of these very complex problems, but for policymakers and practitioners the world over who look to this very important research project with admiration, as do I. So let's continue to work together across governments, research institutions and communities to ensure that this wealth of data and evidence actually drives action. And this is the key for us, and this is why I'm very much looking forward to the discussion this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Can I I now call upon Dr Wassie and Dr Getahun to join me in the podium.
Good morning, Your Excellency Olivia Leslie, Ireland Ambassador, and Your Excellency Ms Amanda McLoughlin, Director of the FCDO Development Organization, Dr Getahun Tolessa, Chief Executive Officer of Chief Executive Officer representing Policy, Strategy and Studies from the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs, Dr Alula Pankhurst and your team, distinguished guests. Good morning. Today we are having a very important session, which is actually a longitudinal study result, which can be a good input for our policy. The government of Ethiopia has been committed to improve the lives of young people. This has been clearly witnessed by its policy and strategic documents, and this is because this age group actually belong to the third of the national population. So we are obliged to focus and invest on them, because they have a good return for the economy. They are, also improving the next intergenerational health, and also because they suffer a huge amount of conflicts and disease burdens. So they are the area of focus for the Ministry of Health. So we have been doing a lot with a focus on them, and that has been shown by the recent findings from DHS, EDHS 2025, where we have seen a significant reduction in teenage pregnancy. But despite the findings in reduction of teenage pregnancy, we have seen a slight increment in urban setup, which actually needs to be given a focus from the different research results, which one will be the young lives focus area. And we have been implementing different national initiatives to focus and to support the young age groups. This includes IUCD Smart Start at national level. And this age group actually receives a lot of attention by the department, and the ministry is still committed to improve the health of the young people. When we are ready to support the Young Lives initiatives, and the ministry is committed on the upcoming policy brief contribution and commitment for its implementation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Your Excellency, Honorable Ambassador Olivia, Your Excellency, Ms Amanda, Your Excellency Dr Alula Pankhurst, Your Excellency Dr Wassie, Representative of Ethiopia, and distinguished guests. The Ministry of Women and Social Affairs has promoted improvements in the condition of women and other vulnerable groups following on from the previous work of the Ministry of Women, Children and Youth. positive results from the continued intervention can be seen from the improvements demonstrated in the latest Ethiopian Demographic and Health Survey, notably the reduction on maternal mortality, child staggering, and fertility. Young Life has worked closely with the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs in organizing the Women, Children and Youth Research and Practice Forum together with UNICEF, held every month at the Ministry and online. The forum has been meeting for 15 years and has around 1,500 members and provides a space to present and discuss policy relevant findings, bringing together government expertise, international and national non-governmental organizations, and research organizations to debate the findings. The forum has produced 14 annual seminars, summaries with a forwarded by our Ministry, Honorable Dr. Ergoge Tasfaye, and 36 newsletters which are distributed in the members, to the members. The forum recently celebrated its 50th anniversary with a workshop and published proceedings. Over the years, Young Lives has presented findings of its research and commented on policies and strategies relevant to the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs and previously the Ministry of Women, Children and Youth. Young Life has commented on successive drafts of the children's policy and the practices and strategies on harmful traditional practices, the worst forms of child labor, and on social protection. Today's launch of 6 qualitative rounds of research provides important findings about the life of young men and women in the mid-20s and early 30s and their experience growing and becoming adults through hard times and a series of crises, including the COVID pandemic, conflicts, climate change, and inflation. The findings will be useful to inform government policy and programs, taking into account the view of the young men and women themselves. Finally, the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs is committed to continue to collaborate with Young Lives and to maintain the work of the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs to ensure that research findings are discussed and can be useful for policy, practice, and programming. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kafel. I'm based in the Department of Economics and University. In that I work as research associate with Young Lives and Engage. So today I will share this first presentation, which focuses on health. There are 3 presentations. The first presentation by Nardos. Her presentation focuses mainly on these harmful traditional practices such as child marriage and FGM, maternal and child health and sexual and reproductive health, followed by presentation by Dr. Issa. His presentation focuses on young people with disabilities, and the third one is by Dr. Alula, who will present about mental health issues and well-being. So Nardos will present for 30 minutes because she covers lots of topics. And Dr. Isaac and Dr. Alula each use 10 minutes. So first, I will give the session to Nardos. Nardos, you have only 30 minutes. I will be very strict on time because we have a huge audience and we have to gather as many questions as possible. So,
good morning, all. I will be presenting on topics that are very much interlinked, as you can see: FGM, early marriage, maternal child health, and SRH. So this is just the presentation outline. I will just directly dive into the main findings. From our side, there is this practice of FGM or FGMC practices, which has been done since birth. So some of the sites have shown declines in the practice, while there are still some sites practicing these procedures, and some are also varying by age. The procedure involves different types. The first one is partial or total removal of the external female genitalia, and in some places this is being followed by infiltration, which is narrowing of the vaginal opening. And this happens at different ages. Some are undergoing the procedure in their early infancy, soon after birth, especially in the northern parts of Ethiopia. The others during their early teens, especially before getting married, in most parts of Ethiopia, according to our Young Lives data. So generally the practice is more prevalent in rural areas, with special emphasis from our Young Life sites and that of Oromia sites. So when we see the drivers of FGM, there are different reasons, as you might know. The first and the most reason is the cultural values, especially driven by patriarchal norms. The fact that men always expect their potential wives to undergo the procedure for reasons of controlling their sexuality. And there are also long-standing traditions. For example, in most parts of our sites, undergoing the procedure is really considered as a normal and necessary one. So, in fact, some of this procedure is being supported by mothers and also, in some cases, by mother-in-laws. And there are also reasons tied to social pressures and also the beliefs about sexual purity. Most of the girls who are not undergone the procedures are usually stigmatized by peers. For fear of that, the girls want to undergo the procedure, even if they know the law prohibits it. For example, in one of the sites, in our sites in Oromia, these uncut girls are usually called by a derogatory term called lubudam. So for fear of this, most of the girls in the sites went to undergo the procedure. There are also other reasons tied to preparation for marriage. In terms of marriage, it is also seen as a rite of passage that indicates the girl is now ready to get married, so she has to go the procedure. So this is just one of the extracts from our community leader, the gender expert, saying that it is really tied to the cultural reasons, and it's done for cultural reasons. When we come to early marriage, there has been significant progress in reduction to child marriage. but the practice is still continuing in some parts of the country, especially in the rural areas. Girls are still getting married very early. When we see the Young Lives data, especially the last round of data, round 7, which has been done in 2024, our findings shows that there is a decline in child marriage from 13% in the older cohort to 5% in the younger cohort. So this is just a cohort comparison, so there is a slight decline in the overall rate. However, this doesn't mean that the younger cohorts are still getting married at a young age, especially 19% of them, 1 in 5, that is about 19% of them are getting married while they are under 18. So this is just a table to show you that. So there are, we have seen that there is a decline in early marriage. However, there is also a shift in marriage trends. Based on our findings, the young people currently are very active. They are very active agents. They can decide everything about themselves, by themselves. Due to this, they also tend to select their own marriage partner on their own initiative. This is also a common trend both in the rural and urban areas, with slight variations. For example, when we take the rural areas, there is this form of marriage, voluntary abduction, where the girl consents to the marriage, especially in the Oromia regions. And most of the couples prefer this kind of marriage to avoid paying the bride's payments. And most of the girls married through this form of marriage, especially between the age 14 and 17, while there is a little delay in the age for the boys to get married, which is 17 to 18. So there is also another trend, which is very much new in Amhara and Tigray sites in the rural areas, where most of the girls are getting married after finishing their high school, tertiary education. And also the others are also getting married when they don't find jobs. So this is informal cohabitation, which is really a new trend. Actually, informal cohabitation is more of a trend in urban areas currently. So I'm not going to read all of the citations in the interest of time. What drives early marriage? There are different reasons, of course. Some are social, economic. So the first and the most reason is related to education. The limited prospects of educational outcomes and employment opportunities, especially in the rural areas, tend to push most of these young people into marriage. And the other reason is caregivers often want to have grandchildren and see their children established or cared for. And there are also other reasons related to marriage endowments, especially the gesmi or the dowry, which is paid by the parents of the bride to the groom, and the gebara, the bride wears in Oromia, which is paid by the husband of the bride to her family. So in order to escape paying these marriage endowments, some of our young lives children tend to engage in early marriage. And of course, very rare case, but still one of the cases or the reasons that is driving young people is to escape parental arranged marriage. This is actually surprisingly a case in urban sites in Addis Ababa. You can see the second quote saying that he has been forced to get married because he doesn't want to lose his girlfriend to a rich husband that the parents are arranging for. And in fact, as we are also seeing the impacts of the conflict and how they are shaping the experiences of these young people, where the conflict is also the other reason driving most of young lives children to marriage, especially for the girls. Parents want them to get married for their safety, and also in conflict-affected areas, some parents mentioned that they want to compensate the lives they have lost during the war. For that reason, they want their children to get married and give birth. So this is the other reason. And again, related to that, there is also this trend of migration in some parts of the rural areas. So to avoid the risky migration that these girls are going to take, their parents rather, even if they are not ready, they still prefer early marriage over that kind of risky migration. These are some of the reasons that are pushing the girls to marry early. In fact, there are also some of the young lives who are also delaying marriage because of different reasons. For example, when getting married, they are expected to buy to pay these marriage transactions, which I've said on one hand is also pushing the marriage, and on the other hand is also delaying. For example, the Gezmi, the dowry payment in Tigray, has increased from 1,500 to 300 in 2025. And similarly, the Braywell or the Gabera in Oromia has quadrupled from 10,000 to 40,000. So to avoid these things, due to these things, since they are expected to buy or to provide these marriage endowments, and they don't have that thing to do because of living in these economic uncertainties, they still delay the marriage. And the other issue is the lack of essential resources. When marriages are arranged formally, parents are expected to give resources to the newlyweds, as you might know. And in rural areas, they give livestock or a plot of land where they can establish their separate households and lead their own lives. But this has not been the case recently, and for fear of that, most of the young people are delaying the marriage. In fact, there is also inflation issue and shifts in social expectations and marriage norms. In the past, parents used to arrange the marriage of their children, but currently they prefer to invest in the education of their children, where can they become self-independent and engage in their own employment opportunities. And I will directly pass to the sexual and reproductive health. When we see the extent of awareness and knowledge of sexual and reproductive health, we see young people are getting this awareness knowledge from two different sources. The first one is the formal source, especially from schools and school clubs, where SRH information is integrated into the normal biology class and also the gender clubs. And also in some schools there are health extension workers collaborating with these gender clubs to provide the necessary SRH information and awareness. And the other source is the media, radio, TV, and social media. Actually, radio is the case, typically the case for rural young people, while the other social media, different platforms, as you can see, Facebook and TikTok, they are typically an attribute of urban areas. So there are also health facilities from the health facilities in clinics, health centers, health courses, where these youth get user-friendly services, especially on counseling and also video education. These are some of the formal where they give access information to SRH. And also there are also some governmental and non-governmental NGOs that are working on this issue specifically, using the existing community level programs and campaigns. And there are also other informal sources, especially these young people get some knowledge about it from older siblings and peers, where they provide especially information about puberty and menstruation for both boys and girls. there is also this trend of peer-to-peer education programs that has been led by health professionals for young people between the age 15 and 24, where they can access information and awareness about different issues. And as a recent initiative within this umbrella, there are peer educators that are also raising awareness about cervical cancer screening, not actually in all parts of the young life sites, but this has been the case in 2 sites in Tigray and Sidama, which is Arwad. And there is also an information, the family and community are also informal source of information for some of the young people. So there is this cultural taboo that is hindering these parents from fully engaging with their children and talking about these sexual and reproductive issues. These are just some of the citations for the respective source of information, so I'm not going to read it in the interest of time. However, there are variations as to how these young people are accessing information about SRH. Based on our findings, we came across that some are, especially when we come to menstruation for the girls, some of the girls are very well informed during their first periods, while others have very limited knowledge, and that can be a shock, especially when they first experience it. In such cases, there are some NGOs providing emergency sanitary pads in some of the school, which is not really the case for all the sites, and also really a problem for sites in conflict-affected regions. And when we see by gender, both boys and girls appear to have similar knowledge about SRH, especially when they are 15, but this understanding starts to vary when they become of age. Like, for example, when they are 19, the boys tend to be more knowledgeable than the girls. And again, married men seem to have very limited knowledge about contraceptives and general SRH issues, while again, those in urban areas are slightly better informed. Where do these young people access the SRH services? Generally, many young people start using contraceptives after marriage and proving their fertility. You know, in Ethiopia, once you get married, you are expected to prove your fertility first, and then after having one or more children, you might be required to use contraceptive. So this is similar with our findings that most of the girls in our sample start using the contraceptive either after having 1 or 2 children. And there are few cases of girls who started using in their teens before marriage while they are in a relationship. Where do they access these services? They mostly access it from government health facilities, private health facilities, and to a certain extent in pharmacies, which are the main sources. And even these are the main sources. The access varies depending on the availability and the user preference. So based on the user preference, for example, if someone to access contraceptive fails, there are also others who want to use implants. So it varies. The access also varies based on their preference. Again, the pattern of contraception also varies. Unmarried women, in relationship always tend to use post pills, which is taken after sexual intercourse, and condoms, while married women use the other available sources I've mentioned above, and also calendar methods. There are some challenges accessing SRH services. Of course, the first and most mentioned factor is war and conflict. Most of the SRH services have been disrupted by the war in conflict-affected areas, forcing some of the young people to buy from private facilities. As we know, most of the SRH services were supposed to be for free, but due to the disruption of the services by the war, some of them are forced to buy to incur additional costs in buying from other service providers. And again, there is this fear of sterility or fertility. There is an assumption among young women that certain contraceptives can cause infertility, and due to that, they don't want to use it. There is also other health impact of it. For example, some types of contraceptives are seen to have negative impacts, like hair loss or continuous bleeding. Some were mentioning that they were experiencing a continuous bleeding after using some sort. As you can see in this quotation, some women experience bleeding after placing an IUCD, and they will get it removed within the months if the bleeding continues. This is what the maternal and child health expert in rural Tigray was saying. Of course, there is also a cultural aspect of it to why they are not using. Husband's dominance and limited knowledge is also the other reason. Husbands most often want to have more children and do not allow their wives to use the contraceptives. On the other hand, there are also some husbands who are not well informed about the subject matter, and they don't want to own it as their own and leave the subject completely to their wives. And there are also others who want to get pregnant so that they can get married. So they want to prove their fertility, and then the marriage comes. There are, as you know, there is also these religious beliefs and some communities that prohibits the use of contraceptives. When I pass to the maternal and child health, early parenting trend generally, there is a decline in rates of early parenting based on our around 7 young lives quantitative data. Only 7% of younger women had child by the age 19 compared to the 18 older cohort women. So there is a general decline in rates of early parenting. Access to MSH services, overall, starting with the time when we did our last round of qualitative survey in 2019, that means 6 years ago, overall there is an improvement in access to MSH services, and there are also multiple service providers being placed in different areas, including government, health institutions, hospitals, health centers, health boards, family guidance association, and also to a certain extent non-governmental organizations providing these services. Actually, there are a range of MCH services provided, starting with antenatal, postnatal health care to nutrition and immunization. I don't want to go into details of it. You can find it from the report. And this is all done through the strong work of the health extension workers, where the health extension workers raise awareness by visiting the homes, and also there is these women monthly forums where they gather different women and discuss about the issue. When we see the institutional deliveries and home births, generally institutional deliveries are increasing currently, but that doesn't mean there are still some parts of the country that are practicing the home births. For example, in the most rural areas, in the remote rural areas, there are mothers who are giving birth at home. There could be a different reason to this. This includes, for example, most of them, when we asked them, they said that when their labor is short and when they don't face prolonged labor pains, they prefer to to have their child at home. And also there is this lack of information, especially for first-time mothers, on where to give birth and the general information about child care. And there are still others, even if they have the information, there are still others who prefer traditional birth practices. And also, the first and most reason is tied to transportation, especially in conflict-affected areas. Most of the ambulances have not been working. Because of that, most of the mothers are forced to give birth at home. There is also variation in MSH experiences, especially young women in rural areas still have complaints. Though we said there is a general increase or improvement in general MSH services, there are some women in rural areas who have problems with that. For example, it is tied to the absenteeism of the health professionals and also the medications and the general kits that are necessary for this service. So due to lack of all these facts, there is a problem of MSH services in rural areas. Fathers from both courts, young and old court, in rural and urban areas have limited involvement generally in MSH services, and there are a few of them who are following or accompanying their wives to the health centers during the antenatal health care, and also others who purely leave the issue to the women. However, again, when we see the urban fathers, they are better involved in this issue. There are also problems related to accessing MSH services, as we have said. All this, the war and the conflict issue is cross-cutting across all the topics we are talking here. And also, there is also lack of incentives and support to institutional deliveries. Institutional deliveries have been there since 2013, if I'm not mistaken. But currently, due to different factors, especially due to inflation and also due to conflict and ongoing wars currently in some parts of the country, this has been terminated, and this is again discouraging mothers from giving birth at the health centers. There is also lack of comprehensive antenatal services and resources for women, which have been reported many times, that there is no laboratories and medications and other required tests and health professionals. And also ambulance is an issue, especially due to regular fuel shortage and also insecurity in some parts of the country that is affecting the general MSH services. So these have been some of the problems we have come across, and we came across some proposed recommendations by topics. For example, for FGM, I think we are saying that stigma. The underlying the cultural norms are really the problem. So it is good, for example, to address the stigma and discrimination, especially for unmarried girls, that when they are uncut, that they are isolated from the community. So it's good to raise awareness about different during using different campaigns. And also it's good to engage boys and men, because as we have been saying, both in SRH and MSH services, the involvement of the men and the boys is very limited, so it's good to engage them. And also, as we might know, some of the reasons that are driving early marriage are the economic matter issues. So it's good, for example, to target economic incentives or conditional cash transfers for families to create economic opportunities for young people, so that they are not pushed to get married very early. And it's also good to reestablish government and community efforts, especially in conflict-affected areas that have been terminated. When we come to SRL, it's good to know this initiation, the current initiative of peer-to-peer education or peer-to-peer educator is there, but I think it's good to expand that, especially in the rural areas and conflict-affected areas by providing targeted programs and training local peer educators. I don't have to go in detail to all of this because you have it at hand with you, and also good to provide a comprehensive program that integrates ministerial awareness into the national curriculum, because the problem related to menstruation is really an issue for some of the girls, because there are some girls in some parts of the country that are not going to school or that are terminating school during their menstrual periods. So because of that, it is good to target a comprehensive program that can reduce the absenteeism of girls from school. Let me directly go to the MCH. So it's good to, again, empower the husbands and the fathers to participate in antenatal and postnatal care to address discriminatory gender norms and strengthen general MCH outcomes. It's good to develop community-based awareness to promote, especially institutional delivery, improve the antenatal and postnatal care, and also good to improve the general access to MSH services in conflict-affected areas and rural areas. And again, specifically for conflict-affected areas, it's good to restore MSH services in rural and conflict-affected areas. I thank you. Before I close my presentation, as we know, these topics are, as I said, are very much interlinked. For example, we know the root causes of it. Most of them are driven by gender inequalities, poverty, and social norms. So there is this cycle of impact. For example, when a girl undergoes FGM, it is high likely that she is going to get married very early, which leads her to have a child very early, and then drop out of school, have very limited knowledge about SRH and MCH services. So it is very much interlinked, and it kind of continues the cycle of poverty. Because of that, programs that need to address this problem should address them together, not together. Like, for example, when eliminating FGM, we are also addressing the problems of early marriage. I thank you for listening.
Yes. Okay. As a part of this research, disability has come as an emerging issue, which has never been in the first round of qualitative and survey. So we'll be looking at the type of disabilities, cause, consequence, and some conclusion and policy implications. Fortunately or unfortunately, we found only 14 young people who have been affected by disability among 181 in 4 sites to Integrai because of the conflict, Oromia and Sidama. More young men than women because of the conflict, and of course the same courts. This table shows a summary of the young people who have been really studied in depth their disabilities. This shows the right one is pseudonym because we use that, gender, court, disability types, cause, and treatment. So one thing that you can see is that mobility impairment, about 7, hearing difficulties 4, vision loss 2, and long-term epilepsy is 1. So you can see from the causes more from work-related or early childhood illnesses, and of course conflict affected because of participation in the combat in the north. In the treatments, you see the formal and informal, and sometimes mixed of them. More disability young people go to, mainly first they go to the traditional, then they go, if they are not healing, to formal because of limited resources. So to show you, we have the report already there, but just to show you some of the causes. Mobility impairment, accident, work-related battlefield. For instance, this one, a young one from Tigray has been involved in conflict, so has been injured by the sharpener in the legs and has been sustained for some time. Polio, we have minor report on that one. This one is a polio that's missed vaccination at childhood, affecting young person in our sites. Vision impairment, mostly in irrigation areas in Oromia have been affected a lot, and also in Hawassa, where there is really sign sea. Hearing difficulties, you can see that most of the young people are saying that they are hearing difficulties because of some accidents or untreated problems. So, but some of them have been fortunate, for instance, like Zoma from Sidama, who has been able, their family were able to send her to health care, and she was healing, but others were not able to have that opportunity. Epilepsy has been one case. This one is one girl that has been really throughout our study for the last 19 years who've been sustained epilepsy, but that has also forced her to physical injury because of falling or lack of medicine or a lot of things, you see. So what are the consequences of disabilities? Economic challenge. Many families are unable to afford, or young people to get health care or buy medicine. Some of the parents have sold their cattle or what they have. Impact on education. For instance, one of our study children who is in university has been affected by hearing problems and has been affecting really his school performance. The other is on impact on work and employment. More young people who are disabled or are not working to do especially agriculture, and those who have been affected by the war were not able to do their work properly. So it affected a lot. The serious matter comes from social exclusion, mental illness. They have been excluded, insulted, a lot of stigma. As you can see, Duda or a diff, some of losing teeth, Sharifo, a lot of stigma has been there. So to conclude, what are the disabilities? They vary by location and, of course, gender. In Oromia and Sidama, young people experience vision hearing impairment linked to weather condition and work-related exposure, because in Oromia sites we have young people working in irrigation and plant flower, so there are a lot of problems there. And in Sidama, also around Hawassa, the sun and the weather has been really impacting. In Tigray, young people have been affected by war, and 3 of them have been really involved and have been sustained long-term disability. Use of health care services, young people access mix of formal and informal, traditional areas, community remedies, health care service. They start with for informal because of no resource, but later some of them who can afford go to the formal. Economic burden on families is really high cost of medication, has been affecting really, and especially in the areas where there was conflict, and the price of health care has been very expensive. Something which has come throughout in our study is the mental health consequences. Disability combined with financial strain, social exclusion-related mental health problems. So really the social stigma and the social exclusion for people with disability has been very serious. For instance, if I take one example, a person who was disabled, who could not do the farming, then has to go to serve a church because it can be afforded. But in the church, he was also excluded, marginalized because of disability. So there is a very limited space for people with disability to sustain life. So what would be earlier policy implications that we would discuss or pose? I think strengthening health care access is very important. Early detection is very important. The polio or hearing problems, if they get treated earlier or physical disability, then they could have been a better position. So early detection is very important at community level prevention. Inclusive health services, broader access to community-based health insurance, which is coming up now in the communities, but most of the households were not able to afford the small premium. So something has to be done, people with disability either to be included. I know there are the Ministry of Health working on that, but something has to be done targeting people with disability. Inclusive education, disability-friendly teaching methods, braille or written material for hearing impaired. As you see, one of the university has been really in a difficult situation because he cannot hear properly and his performance has been affected. So what is there in support for him? Raising awareness, reduce stigma in the school and at community, and that's very common. Employment and livelihoods, provide vocational training that really matches with their disabilities is very important. Social inclusion and awareness, promote community campaigns, challenge stigma and foster. I know there are less disabilities communities who do, association who doing this one, but it's very important to strengthen that. Mental health and psychological support, integrate mental health into primary health care access is very important, and also offer trauma and counseling, psychological support for war affected people, young people who have been affected by the war. Still, they are feeling the trauma. It's not so their disability is really reminding of them throughout their life. So there should be something post-war trauma counseling and psychological support. Thank you very much.
I have how many minutes? 2 minutes.
For transition. Yeah.
So in order to have time for discussion, I'm going to go really fast on this, on the mental health, which is basically about resilience in times of crisis. So the Round 7 survey found quite high levels of depression, anxiety, stress, and even PTSD. 17% depression, 23% anxiety, stress very high, 61%. And then, of course, moderate to severe being much, much more so. And much higher in the older cohort and in women, except for PTSD, which was higher in men. From these, we selected 25 cases for the qualitative research. So looking at the stresses, COVID, looking back now, not a lasting serious issue. This young woman, when I first heard about it, I became stressed. After being screened, I was relieved. But it had very strong indirect impacts on small-scale businesses in urban areas, like this woman trader in Hawassa. No mobility of people, business activities were low. I sold the purchased items at a low price. Basically, other issues were more important. In Addis Ababa, the loss of work due to vegetable market removal. In Tigray, of course, the war meant COVID paled into insignificance. When we started talking about the war, people start talking about the war. Now, unemployment and underemployment, also particularly important in urban areas and where there's loss of work, and in the post-conflict situation in Tigray, the lack of work and limited opportunities really led to depression and loss of hope. So this young man, before the war, youth worked, had businesses. Almost all had jobs. Now everything is destroyed. The situation is very bad, leading to depression. There's also a gender dimension, more challenges for young mothers, like this young woman in Tigray. I feel I have nothing and I'm dependent on my family, baby and no job, which adds to my stress. Then there was inflation, rising prices, a major worry. This young man in Addis, this is the main source of my stress. Before I wasn't stressed because prices were reasonable. I only have stress when I feel I don't have money for basic needs. Also compounded by additional costs such as medical care, and in the post-conflict situations, the costs still remain very high. This young woman in Tigray, all costs of goods are inflating, cost of living now turned back almost to the time period of the siege. And in the war in particular, a series of different stresses, food shortages, the fear of anticipating war, experiences of witnessing violence, and of course death. My mental health problems all started when the soldiers entered our home, said this young woman in an urban area, and we haven't had to put the rest of the quote here. Separation from relatives, lack of knowledge whether fighting relatives survived. Young woman in a rural area, I was sick only because of the missing information about my brother. I haven't had any other cause that intensified my mental health problems. And then, of course, grieving over deceased relatives. Another young woman in a rural area. The grief will never get out of my mind when I see his friends who went to school together having jobs, but when I heard he died, I stopped thinking and felt relief. Now, how do people cope? Most did not have access to mental health services, mainly because these services hardly exist. And even when they do, doctors generally prescribe painkillers without psychosocial counseling. Then there is the issue of cost and referral to distant places, and that health insurance is not covered, doesn't cover mental health, making access even harder. So a young man who was at university in Dilla, he was given a referral paper to Addis Ababa, but didn't go. He said the university didn't treat him well because he didn't have health insurance and he couldn't pay for direct treatment. And then there's a fear of stigma that deters some people from seeking support. So this young man, the same young man actually, saying that he didn't want to share his problems with other people because he didn't want to be judged. Then we found that a major way, given the lack of services, was people preferred tabal, holy water. So this young woman in Tigray, I don't think the current medical services will cure him. The service is not yet improved. Maybe he could be cured about holy water, talking about her brother. Many had more faith in religious cures. In Addis Ababa, a young woman, if you go there, you'll be given medication. I'd rather talk to St. Mary than a health expert. I prefer to go to church. I do not believe the medical treatment will alleviate my tension. And family support was considered crucial, as this young woman from Tigray explained how her mother really helped her. So the conclusions. Crisis and resilience. These young people are transitioning to early adulthood in unusually stressful contexts of multiple polycrises that are successive, overlapping, and cumulative. Not just the economic consequences of COVID, higher education constraints, which Isaac talks about, limited employment, job losses and uncertain futures, which we'll hear about again later, and high inflation eroding livelihoods, the aspirations of migration themselves creating stress, and of course, last but not least, the protracted war in northern Ethiopia. So these crises put additional burdens and stress on young people transitioning from school to work and establishing households. But we found extraordinary resilience despite all these amongst most of the young people interviewed. There were indeed, of course, a few cases of serious mental illness. Sometimes these started in childhood, sometimes they were linked to other illnesses, or it was running in families. People with mental health issues were sometimes seen as victims of the evil eye, and there were cases that resulted from traumatic events, notably rape. How do people cope? Well, the war in Tigray leading to many stresses, including severe hunger, worry about actual or potential violence, separation from relatives, loss of mobility, worry about mobilized siblings, not knowing whether they died, grief over death, and also survivor's guilt. So the sequential and combined crises created serious challenges for all young people. Some coped better, others suffered varying degrees of mental distress and illness. Few respondents had access to mental health services, but they tended to receive just painkillers, usually without psychosocial care. So the young man in Tigray, they give the same tablet for all mental illnesses. And then the limited access was compounded by additional costs, including for travel, and also because private mental health care is mainly private, and then the worry about delays through referral and mental health not being covered by insurance, lack of confidence in service, and fear of stigma. Most, including those who received health care, felt that prayer and/or holy water treatment, while not always a cure, was often more effective. And then there were gender and family and community dimensions. young women suffering trauma due to war violence and grief over death of husbands and brothers, and the caring responsibilities and limited mobility. Women often turn to religion and family-based coping, peer and neighborhood support, for instance, through coffee ceremonies, whereas young men suffered mental stress during the war and post-war situation due to limited work opportunities, and some of this led to depression and the wish to migrate. There was also evidence of some young men adopting negative coping strategies, substance abuse, chat, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, gambling, antisocial and criminal behavior. So this health worker in Tigray said, women are the most affected, but also the first to show progress after support. And then family and peer support were very important, but there were also some negative family views. So the fear of stigma led some families to hide mental illness, and seeking treatment was seen as shameful. This caregiver in Tigray, she was affected by a bad spirit, so we did not let the neighbors know. Some young families view young men as undisciplined and involved in negative coping, and they in turn feel misunderstood, hopeless, leading to the desire to migrate, about which we will hear a lot. So the recommendations, I think, let's skip these because you have them on the sheets that we'll be distributing, and I think it's more important that we get time for discussion, and we will have a session of group work to discuss the specific recommendations on the 8 issues. And so I think there were 2 slides of recommendations, but let's stop here and give a chance for response.
My name is Alamayo from Ethiopian Civil Service University. I have 2 technical questions, and I promise to provide my specific feedbacks on the policy recommendations in writing to the young lives. However, your research are really wonderfully handled, but policy brief is a document that informs policymakers to take action. In that case, therefore, it has to provide a specific issue to a specific target organization or ministry or anybody else, if you like. But now your research are about Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor and Skills, and the migration issue is interministerial. So, to whom this policy brief is written, and to inform what policy and what outcome are you expecting from this policy brief, unless and otherwise you just address a single authority to address the problems in a way they are articulated, number 1. Number 2 is one of the research, I love the way Dr. Alula has presented his studies, but one of the research discloses the identity of the informants. Is that ethical to do so? And should we disclose the identity of the respondents? And does the ethical clearance allow you even to do so? So you have to be careful in this regard. Thank you.
I think this is really excellent. No problem. A couple of questions for Nardos. On child marriage, I was very pleasantly surprised to learn that rates are going down. I thought they were actually going up, particularly in conflict areas. But if we're at 20% now with the younger cohort and norms are changing, who are the outliers? Do we know who's marrying their children off at a younger age? Because in the areas of work, sorry, I should have introduced myself. My name is Sihin, and I run a feminist organization called Qualitative. We work in child marriage in Amhara, in the Dara Tower area, and we find it's the clergy, Christian Orthodox clergy, who marry younger women, younger girls, really. So if this is a trend that you've seen, because I think that would have huge implications for policy, I'd really like to hear that. Also, you've mentioned that in the younger cohort, you've looked at experiences of violence, but this wasn't included in the report, so I'd be very happy to hear anything you've been able to find, particularly around sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you.
My name is Getahun. I'm a demographer from Addis Ababa University. I would like to maybe the questions to the first speaker, and my question related to methodological issues. I appreciate and understand the power of qualitative data in explaining a given issue in detail and provide answers to questions like how and why. However, nowadays scientific evidences that are needed for policy and program issues are expected to use mixed methods in which the quantitative and quantitative are mixed, because we need to know some of the evidence, like where we are in terms of level, determinants, and the like. For instance, some of your findings are overlapping. In early marriages, several factors are there. In contraceptive use, several factors are there. But had this been regressed, a single factor could have been identified. That is used for policy issues. On the other hand, if you continue producing qualitative reports and quantitative reports separately, how we are going to make use of them? Who's going to merge them together? And I need some explanation on this question.
Excellent and very sobering results. I would like just to ask one question. The first presenter was saying men were less informed about savage issues, and I would like to understand what less informed means. Do you have any quantitative data on that, or is it just the qualitative one? Thank you. I'm Curtis from Gates Foundation.
I'm Dr. I call myself an independent consultant, but I've been working for the last 3.5 decades in this area. I'll make it short. The first one is on nomenclature. The naming of this session. It says understanding of youth experiences. So I made multiple crises. I thought you had two cohorts, the 1994 cohorts and the 2000 cohorts. I made a simple calculation, arithmetic calculation, and some of them are already over 30 years. Right, the 1994 cohort. So I was wondering whether, for clarity purpose, if we can put youth stroke adults, because some of them are already adults, are no more youth. The second one is, in conflict situations, one of the prominent impacts is sexual and gender-based violence. Rape has been weaponized. You know that rape was used as weapon of war, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of raped girls and women. And I was expecting in this SRHR presentation that we will have some data on this one, because this is a very crucial issue that has got some publicity, and I know some organizations are already there. The last one is, I understand that this kind of research, as I always say during this platform, that we need to use it for what we call the 3 Ps, for policy, program, and practice. I understand that there are recommendations which we'll be discussing on policy issues, but I would like to hear how far. I'm told that we are now in the 6th round. How far have other organizations been using this data, not only for policies, but for programs and practice? Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your nice presentations. I'm Kala from Policy Studies Institute. My only question is, do you manage to validate your trend? You have seen a reduction in FGM and child marriage. There is a recent data, NEWA and Ministry of Women and Social Affairs. How do you manage to validate your recent data that can tell you something? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Marcos from the Federation of Ethiopian Associations of Persons with Disabilities. My question goes to the first presentation, Mr. Nardos. During the presentation, I was just wondering to hear about young girls with disabilities in accessing all those health-related services and information. As we know in our country, having access to such kind of services is very difficult, let alone to the person with disability. For person with no disability itself is very difficult. So my question is, have you just paid attention to these people with disability as you conduct this service? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Alula from Addis Ababa University. Just I should limit myself to one question, even though many. One of the question, the first question that I had was that I think that we have been talking on female genital mutilation for the last even more than that 3 decades. And we have been told that the very cause is social norms, patriarchal norms, this and that. But I would love if you could have seen if there is a change across generation as young lives goes. Is there any pattern change regarding the belief or that social norm exists among different groups? And one thing, if I add, I couldn't capture the concept of informal cohabitation. Cohabitation is cohabitation. If there is something just to learn. Thank you so much.
To the presenters who will organize presentation.
No thanks, please. Straight to the question.
I'm Dr. Social Psychology at Southern University. So I express my appreciation to the presentations, but I do have 2 common questions. One is, I feel sometimes there is a going around the bush type of issue about FGM, early marriage issue. In addition to the factors, contributors, etc. that Nardos has mentioned, I believe, I have studied some of these issues. The elders and the religious leaders are the main culprits. If they change, if they say stop it, then I think this thing could decrease. Because 7 years ago, UNICEF, etc., we studied, to Harare, Somalia, Qual, periphery of Oromia, etc., the percentage was some 50, 60%, 80%. But still, you stated in a diplomatic language that it has been decreasing. What is this decreasing? Naturally, things, we change, people change, society change, culture change, but very slow, very slow. I think, those are areas that we have to do some work bluntly, and that they have to say, no, below 18 is illegal, it will not be done. So Kabele, elders, religious leaders, etc. say that is it. Second, FGM, illegal, absolute, etc. That kind of notion has to come up. That's one. The second, I'm sorry, I know I did go beyond 1 minute to mention. The second is issue of, nobody has mentioned this issue of conflict. Maybe we have to think of peace education, peace in the family, peace in the community. Not only the political government and these liberation fronts and immigration, this and that, but family peace, community peace. So rather than the civic and ethical education, or in addition to some aspect of that, we might have to go into peace education in the family, in the community, in the society at large. Thank you very much.
In relation to the reduction of child marriage and FGM, I want to know if you also considered issues around the role of religious leaders, given the fact that we have experience across the continent from allowing Zambia, where traditional leaders are really taking leadership in terms of addressing these patriarchal cultural norms and taking girls out of cohabitations and child marriage. So have you considered that, and to what extent that contributed if you did? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to just answer two of them and then hand over to my colleagues. The first one is to do with policy and the question about which ministries we work with. Well, actually, because Young Lives is holistic, we have worked with many ministries. Ministry of Education, now mainly Ministry of Health, but right from the beginning with the Ministry of Women, Children and Youth. In fact, over 15 years, we've had monthly seminars every month. So that has been a very, very strong collaboration. But in terms of policy and influencing programs and so forth, we have a whole group work on this, looking at the 8 different topics which over each of the tables here. So I'm not going to say anything on policy itself, but in terms of working with government and bringing bridges across international organizations, funders, development partners, local NGOs, research communities, government and policymakers, I think Young Lives has actually played a role as a bridge and bringing people together. The second area I'd like to focus on, there were several questions about the integration between quantitative and qualitative work. Well, the round 7 survey results, you can see them on the fact sheets on education and learning, on family lives and work, on nutrition and health. So these fact sheets that give you, that have the research that has been looked at with a regression analysis and so forth, have already been published. Now what we're doing is digging deeper into the experiences of how young people have gone through these things, and we specifically selected, in addition to our longitudinal qualitative sample, we selected people that from the round 7 survey that exhibited particular areas in mental health, in SRH, mother and child health, in disability and so forth. And so Young Lives is very much an integrated study where the quantitative and qualitative talk to one another so that we can really have both the trends and the trends over time, but also the lived experiences of how young people have experienced, particularly going through poly-crises over the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe one issue is the pseudonym. We don't use names, so there are pseudonyms everywhere, not only for the individuals, but also for the communities. What we reveal is only the region. So nothing below that. That's explained. The second issue I would like to dwell is, which has come again and again, is the early marriage still prevailing. Nowadays, because of the crisis, parents are worried that their girls are going abroad, risk migration, so they want to marry them. One area which is coming now. The conflict, parents don't want to see their girls going to conflicts or to the compacts, so they want to marry them. These are new trends which are coming. On the FGM, I think one thing which has come throughout our study in the last more than 20 years is, in some communities, definitely it's still prevailing, which is very difficult. In Oromia, still exists. And the issue is as already explained, it's already the patriarchal, but also the culture itself, but more from young men and from the fathers as well. So we have to go back to the fathers. The long-term the issue has come because it prevents them from marriage unless they are going through FGM. That community still prevails, so we have to go the other way, which has been explained, and thank you very much. But it's still prevailing.
Yeah, regarding the outliers in relation to child marriage, in fact, we have some outliers in our sample, some who, if I say, quote-unquote, skip the marriage, join higher institutions, but at the end, even if they have joined higher institutions and completed their education, they are also forced to marry early, some of them, because of some problems, especially related to poverty and less economic opportunities to get work and paid and establish their own family and be economically independent. We have some of our cases who are really doing great in their education and also doing their own income generating activities. Those who are married and who are married ones. Regarding the SRH, if we have also included quantitative issues, if you have paid close attention to this report, we are presenting emerging findings from qualitative study that have been done last year. So, and this is just a preliminary finding presentation. I hope we're going to include some quantitative surveys where we are going to do the analysis and paperwork which are forthcoming. So we haven't seen that included in this one, but we have partially seen that some of the life sites also showing some, we have included some survey findings from the quantitative rounds and findings. If you look at the report, you can find it there. I think most of the other comments are very suggestions, so we take them as they are.
So I will be now presenting 3 papers in one: education, unemployment or underemployment, migration trends. So I'll discuss all the issues related to these 3 key life transitions. Maybe this Alula has already talked about in the morning that this is a report based on Young Life's Qualitative around 6 research, but we have some drawn also from survey around 7. A little bit we will have more papers drawing on longitudinal qualitative and survey as well as external data. But this is more focusing on the impact of multiple crises impacting key life transitions, education, work, and of course migration. To start with education, as you can see from the table, that we have identified what are the level of educational level of students, the young people. We established their levels for everyone because we would like to know. And when you see this in the red one, very unfortunately, only 26 of the 181 young people we have been following for the last 20-something years, only 26 have completed or graduated from colleges or universities. The rest have 95, almost more than half of them have really dropped out of school before finishing, which indicates really the longitudinal data shows that where the young people are in terms of education. Urban, as you know, urban youth are more really having better education, and of course, only 23 young people have complete higher education in between 2019 and 2025, between Qual 5 and Qual 6. In 2025, still about 24 young people are still in school, although they are age 24 and above, they are still in school. So what are the barriers in education if only 26 out of 181 that we have been following qualitative study have not finished their higher education? Then what are the impacts? One thing is the impact of COVID. COVID has impacted, as you know, it has been closed, and this is one case among the others. Conflict in Tigray and Amhara, it has disrupted a lot, and especially in Tigray, many of the higher education, especially the private colleges, have never resumed after the peace agreement as well. So conflict is another issue. Other crises, economic crisis, illness, individual, this is common for everyone, but many young people who are being hit by the economic or inflation have really dropped out of school before finishing their education. The new thing is the educational policy change. As you know, some of our young people has been really experiencing the first policy change where you have the entrance exam in the university campuses. And one of the children, the young people here, says that the introduction of strict school leaving university entrance examination directly impacted some students while discouraging others from aspiring to higher education. They found it's very surprising, and many have been discouraged by its outcome also and in education. So to go to conclusion, because this is in the report, that's why I highlight education aspiration and outcomes. Since childhood, we have been following young people aspiring to complete higher education and have good jobs. But definitely only about 26 of the 181, as you see, are able to achieve that one. Wide variation, urban, rural, of course, the younger course faring a bit better than the others. What are the barriers to progression? As we have seen, the crisis, COVID, the conflicts, rising education costs, economic hardship, illness, and others. Discouragement due to unemployment. Many young people who were aspiring to go to higher education and got better job are now rethinking that is it really valuable to go to higher education when there is no employment opportunities. So many of our people were saying that this is really discouraging. So we will have about 4 issues for discussions that we will discuss later. Quality and equity is very important, of course, as you know. The evaluation system has to improve, of course, that we have discussed, which has come as a new policy. Access to alternative skill training. If they fail in university, then there should be something alternative, or at least skill. Promote education equality. Now we are learning that young people from rural and poor families are finding it very hard to join universities. So inequality is coming. I think we will see in the next few years that inequality will create societal inequality. Support for conflict affect reduce. It's important that there should be catch-up programs. There are some areas there is, but it's not comprehensive. So people who are grouped at different levels should be supported so that they can be catch up. This is education. Then I will move to the under employment in times of crisis. So this is we have established for the 181 young people we studied in qualitatively. Where are they in terms of employment? So I just only to mention that 40 are not employed. If you consider that household work or chores by mothers is still work, but 40 have reported that they are staying at home. Only 32 out of the 181 have established salaried jobs, which shows that really there is an issue of very difficult. 24 of them, as I said, they are in school. So one issue that we should take here is that established employment is no more available for many of the young people. So what are the type of activities they do? Location, urban using informal and employment, wage labor and self-employment, rural predominantly agriculture. Gender, as you know, very unfortunately, out of the 40 unemployed youth, 32 are women, young women, which shows really they are not established with salary or something. So they do very small things, unpaid or child care or harvesting, petty trade, which is really not stable activity. Agent courts, of course, older courts are faring better. Unfortunately, it should have shown that the young people should have been more opportunity as a longitudinal two-court study, but now, because of the older courts were able to establish a better employment opportunity before the conflicts and other crises. That shows that unlike the other results we find, this shows the otherwise. What are the barriers to employment? As the crisis, the conflict in northern Ethiopia is really and has been an issue. like in education. Access to credit vanished, for instance, in Tigray when there was youth cooperatives and they were demolished, they were no more working. So eliminate opportunity for small enterprises. There were a couple of foreign investment in the industries. They were closed and they didn't come back again. So the conflict has impacted a lot. Urban development in Addis Ababa, unfortunately, our young people were very close to the Atkiltara. So it was demolished, and a lot of young people from our study, where we have been following through childhood, they have been dismantled from that opportunity. So a lot of households have been affected, including young people working there. Mismatch between education and jobs, this is really emerging a lot. So young people were expecting that when you go to universities and you go with a job or very matching. But nowadays, it's very difficult. Either they are unemployed or underemployed. So for instance, I take this one. I graduated in 2019 with a BSc in civil engineering from a university. In 2023, I was employed in a government office as a gardener. Currently, I earn 4,000. This lady, since childhood, we were following. She is a paternal orphan. She works in high reports, sorting out daily labor. Since the age of 12, she completed her education, but she had a degree. But now she is working as a gardener, and sometimes really it makes them unhappy that they invested their whole childhood, or their life, but they're still back to gardener or gardener. And she says that she's really feeling demoralized. Another barrier to employment is job security and gender abuse. Of course, young girls, especially in Addis Ababa, have seen that they go everywhere, where in cafes, in hotels, but really abused, and they don't find it secured, so they have to move from one job to other job opportunities. And there are also young people, as I said, 32 of the 40 employed are really unemployed are young women. They are really engaged in small businesses, but it's not secured as such. So it's affecting a lot. Weak institutional support, which is really, in all communities, there are structural barriers. Weak institutional capacity by conflict undermined to create. So there are offices who are supposed to support young people to get employment, but they are very weak, understaffed, and it has never been really useful there. For instance, if I take one example, from Addis Ababa, then from the Tigray, 2,226 young people reported for job, but only 358 were able to go through that office. It's everywhere. So the institutional support is really very weak. So conclusion, multiple crises really affecting employment. Persistent disparity, location, rural young people still in intensive, labor intensive, but very small amount. Gender, of course, some harassment or a lot of instability. A court, as I said, the older one faring better, but because of they were settled relatively before that. Irregular school transition, young people are expecting to finish university or schools and to go to work, but now you find about at the age of 30 in school, so it means that there is no regular transition from school to work. Questions of value of higher education, young people are just questioning is it, and parents as well, is it fair to invest in education now, if there is no employment or underemployment? Weak institutional support is there. So what should we do? Policy implications, string crisis response employment programs when we have a lot of crisis, COVID, war. What do we do? Well, how do we respond to that? Disparity in access and inclusion, support post-conflict recovery is important. A lot of institutions or private business have been closed, so what do? Improve education work transition. Higher education value should be reframed. strengthening institutional capacity and empowering youth and build pathways to decent work. That's very important we have to do, but there are policy issues that we need to discuss. Now let me move to migration. Migration came in this round because, early stage they were not migrating, or we were not really picking a lot of things, but this time it come. So if we start from the survey, round 7 survey, so among the 2,231 interviewed, 35% were moved internally. We have international migration, but we will see in the papers who are about 147 will capture from Turkey. Something that we see is the urban percent is the urban, the difference is high. Another important issue to notice is people move to escape war, more young women, but young men join the army, move to some other area to join the army. So that's really two conflicting issues. Young people having two different directions. Some of the men going to move to some areas for mobilization of army. The others, young females, also run out of their areas to move, escape war. So what are the drivers of migration here? Education, work, flee conflict, marriage, family, or deported fail. This one, the deported returnees and plant migrants are international migrants. This one. 15 have already experienced, some of them have returned, others have been deported. 10, they are still planning and processing during the field work, so we have significant. But one issue which has come throughout our field work is that almost everyone is aspiring to move out of the country. I don't know why. There are a lot of issues to be discussed here. So unemployment and economic deprivation is really the main one. It has been there for many years, of course. And what the trend is shows that young people, especially the young men from Addis Ababa and other areas, because they don't go to other rural areas or other regions, they want to go abroad, to Europe, especially they plan to go to England. My goal is to move overseas. My eyes are in England and Italy. I think about all day and all night. I feel that I am where I am thinking about it. So, but from rural areas, now they are migrating to the Middle East and other areas, but from urbans, it's a tendency to go to Europe. Conflict and instability in the north, especially in Tigray, has really pushed a lot of young people to move to other areas. But for instance, one of our case is that she completed primary education. She was very good, but she interrupted her education because of COVID, then the conflict. Then she ran away without telling her mother, and on the border she was caught up, and she has to send a lot of money, and her mother has to share her jewelry and other things. So it's really a problem. But it's not always the problem which really initiates or driver for migration. Aspiration for a better life. Through childhood, we have been establishing that what your aspiration. Many young people have been telling us that they want to finish their education here, but to go abroad as well. It's not only for economic in some ways. For instance, if you see this one quotation, 20 of my friends left for Europe and only 4 remain in one community in Addis Ababa. He is not poor. He was an orphan from childhood. He was a hard-working child. He dropped grade 10 and has a lot of business. But he says the business is not working with a lot of taxation there. House rent is a lot, and there is no peace. So he says that he's collecting or saving money to go to England, and he's planning. He has already returned from the border from Sudan before 2 years, and was still planning to go. It's a bit expensive to go to England, but to Italy is $950. There are a lot of risks and journey on their ways. definitely. Let me put one example here from on the right side. This is an empirical study done in Tigray when we were in the field, and we captured from the reports from regional report. About 28,000 in 1 year migrated, returning half of them, but 1,220 died en route when they went to the Middle East and other things. It shows a lot. Female 235 injured, 598. 2 of our sites are within these communities. So that's why I brought this one. So a lot of cases of of injuries or deaths of families, a lot of things, which is included in the report. Failure deportation. A lot of young people have been deported, and even including our young people who are returned from on their way. So what do the implication? It's high cost. Really, migration, illegal migration is very costly. Brokers and ransom demand by traffickers is huge. Cost to reach Europe can reach $1 million. They say 1.2 million in Addis Ababa on that time during the data collection. So one thing that the brokers are developing in the communities is that they start with free. They tell until they leave the border. For instance, in Tigray, they say until they reach Afar, they will not ask them for money. Then they start asking some amount. Then it increases everywhere. When the risk increases, then the amount of money increases. So that's where, and in some communities, in one community, there is one trend that if young girls, especially now, young girls are being pushed for that one. If a young girl brings another 4, she will be free to travel without costs. This is the brokers are adapting new things. So a local administrator in Tigray side told us that it's very difficult that people are being told the days of their children, and they are being asked to have letters to contribute money, so they get permission to beg for money in churches or in meetings. So it has been a big burden in the community itself. Gender dynamics, young men, women are more vulnerable, especially on the road, not only when they are away, but also once they arrive there, especially in the Middle East. There are a lot of abuses, workload, they find this very difficult. But the tendency now, underage girls are illegally recruited from school without parents' knowledge is really growing very fast now. 14, 15 years old. Just eloping them to migration. But there are migration outcomes, I think, two ways to see them. There are some positive things, definitely. Migration is one of, pathways for anybody. It's a part of a life course. So reaching the planned destination and finding a job, some find. For instance, one typical, it's a very small example, but one typical example is a lady who migrated at the age of 17 from our studies because she was living, her mother was living in a rented house, and it was a lot of pressure from the landlord, and she was pushed by that one. She went there and brought some money and built a house. That's a satisfaction, but at the expense of education and also health problem for her. It's really failing a lot of problem because of the workload in the Middle East. Still, she feels a pain and she cannot stand for an hour in working in her shop. So negative, a lot. Key transition is disrupted, definitely. They have to have education, work, then they have, or marriage. Instead, they go from school or stop their marriage or leave their work. So it is disruptive of the life course. Family, economic distress, and mental illness. Some of the families pressurized by expectation to send some money. A lot of them have reported the mental illness. Limited economic success. Many of them do not succeed, definitely. They return back without getting. High workload, especially for girls who go early age. This one, for instance, she went at the age of 15. She could not handle the household work, which is very difficult for girls. And that trend is increasing now, which is really unfortunate for young people. So to conclude, migration, a lot of disparity, urban for at this They always attempt to international migration. But from rural areas, especially they want to go to urban areas, but also to Middle East. Domestic mobility motivates global aspiration. We have seen that those young people who move internally are motivated to go abroad. A lot of cases we have. So once I just left house, then they don't get the type of job or life they want, then they want to move to continue their journey to abroad, which is really the domestic and the international migration are very much associated. Risk of regular migration, limited legal pathways, young people go to unsafe routes, exposed to financial loss, deportation, a lot of, especially from Tigray and Amhara, they don't come to Addis, for instance, because of the conflict and a lot of difficulty getting passports and a lot, so they are going, even the university graduates are going that risky routes. Disruptive transition, emerging resilience, of course, some of our resilient still, they find, they try and they succeed. But one thing which is negative in some sense is that we have very limited individuals who succeed from migration, but it is motivating more people than the unsuccess story. They want to hear the success stories than the unsuccessful majority of unsuccess story. I don't know why. That's an issue. So policy implications, I think addressing the root cause, this is a really poverty, education, job, strengthening governance, invest in educational. It's not only economic. Some of them who have a lot of money, like the Barakat who has a lot of money, but he feels that there should be some things to address. Support post-conflict recovery, rebuild infrastructure, restore service, promote youth-led business in war-affected areas is important. Protect migration. I build social protection system against exploitation, excessive works. I think the ministry is working now when they send to Middle East, but how protective they are, I don't know. But that has to be done. Promote safe and legal migration. I think it's very important to, policymakers to influence, even donors to influence the government that legal migration should be promoted, of course. Also, the recipient countries also should be take the balance between illegal migration, legal migration. So sometimes they have to see the trade-off. I think that's simply and legal migration pathways for across migration process. Very expensive, it should be reasonable, but also it should be very transparent and very accommodating for people who can meet the migration requirements. Thank you very much.
University. In fact, my university has a program on migration and development, so I was very immersed listening to beyond my research work. Having that as introduction, I have a couple of, I know it's very complex, but you were talking about aspiration of the youth, and maybe 75 to 70% of the youth lives in rural area, and from the previous presentation, they stop education at elementary school. I wonder if you try to look at what the aspirations for the rural youth, because the skilled agriculture requires an education, at least that's beyond the completion of secondary education. And I think in most of the discourses, be it academic or policy, I think that kind of issue is missed. The other one is, in terms of this skill, it was kind of still highlight a bit, but do you think there is a skill mismatch in the rural area? I mean, in urban areas there is, of course, but most of the time those rural youth, when they migrate to urban, they usually end up in domestic work. And that domestic work doesn't require an education that is beyond, completing the higher, secondary, primary education. So those are the policies. The other one is the culture issue, because you mentioned many didn't make it, but some few make it, and they become the role models for migration. Do you think there is a cultural issue? Because when they come back, we know it, they are flashy. They don't talk about the bad things, they don't have this and that, and they motivate further migration in that aspect. So what do you think of the missing link, or what should be done in terms of the, religious leaders, community leaders, and including the culture that we have? We have these flashy ceremonies for, marriage and others. So what's the take on that? Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Hannah Mariam, and I am an assistant professor at Michigan State. My question is, we do have children, it seems like we have kids as young as 14 joining this illegal migration. When are we supposed to brand this as a human trafficking case? Like, if we have minors involved, can we have the legal protections and the criminalization of the act that would serve towards preventive efforts? Thank you.
It is a very good presentation, but unexplanatory. It was an explanatory presentation. Just to have a question. Did you try to reach out to skill and labor ministry in line with what you have been saying, protection and the like? Because we have been working together with the ministry, and we have tried to develop, health-related information, what they should be trained and the like. So rather than migration outside the country, in that case it is well structured now. They do have a policy, and they do have pre-departure information and training. I think the big gap is internal migration end. What do you really recommend for the internal one? And what was your reach out to them? And what did you find from the thing?
I want to highlight that these days, especially the discourse, especially in the developing country, when we talk about migration, it is shifting. It is shifting to the negative and saying that it's like an opportunity. Some of the developed countries, like the US, they were formed by migrants. It's an opportunity. But it comes negative when it comes to Africa, maybe specifically to Ethiopia, because the way how we do it, because it's illegal. And I believe it should be reflected in the research. Migration is like selling your maybe experience, skill, but it should have been done in the legal means, in the legal form. And one of the recommendations is also that. And these days, the Ministry of Labor and Social Skills is promoting that, and it is establishing a legal means. And we should also highlight that. And migration by itself is not illegal, and we cannot stop it actually. This is a natural form. From the developing countries, from the developed countries also they come and they work. And even there is a critics that they say when they come from the developed country to Africa, it's like an expert. But from developing country to developed country, it's going to be like migrants. But both ways, if you see it critically, we are looking for opportunities. And we should also reflect that in our research. But let us do it in the legal thing.
Education, because that's also my specialty. So in the recommendation, I saw that expanding education as a point to address, but I like to highlight that not expanding, but the quality of education itself is a major factor for young people's decision making. So is it a possibility that to address this issue, that the education quality itself can be a factor for many of the migration, like the quality of education should have some kind of contribution to build the children's or young people's life, to have a meaningful impact in their future livelihood, or to be relevant to their rural or urban living context. So maybe in the recommendation, this point should be addressed, that stress should be given to the quality of education. Just to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ms Amanda McLoughlin from School of Social Work at Alula University. In fact, my question is a bit related to what the gentleman over there said. Do you think education can really be a solution to halt, especially the unsafe migration? Because I personally, myself, have seen young people quitting, from higher education and then go to Middle East and South Africa in an illegal way. So I was always wondering if really education is a choice for the young people in the Ethiopian context, no matter the quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think most of the questions will be input for us for policy.
It will be an opinion on the value of education, definitely, but as our findings show that young people are questioning the value of education. Is really doing well, or is it really an important in our life, or should we invest our resources and the time in other options? One important issue which has been raised is that quality and access. I think people say that now we have to focus on quality, but also access it for education. I mean, you have seen the data which has come recently from the national data. It's still a lot of young people, or 15 to 49, not really having any education, about 30% or something. So still, I mean, when we consider unemployment or other things, it could be a lot of having a university. But comparing with others, I think still access to education is very limited. So we have to see both access and quality of education interchangeably. On migration, I think migration is one important life course. It's very important. But once, if you are not really ready for migration, and if it's not handled properly, at proper age, at proper route, then it will be a risk. That's why. But very few can migrate for import. But still, because of the whole crisis in Ethiopia, people who are migrated, even very few, one in one family, can carry the whole family when there is crisis. That's one thing which has come up in the last 5 years. During the conflict or other things, individuals abroad have been supporting the whole community. So still people are valuing that migration is really valuable. That crisis has pushed for that one. And under normal circumstances, I think for education, employment, and migration, peace is very important. Then employment and other things can follow. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, everybody, for listening patiently. Of course, many more questions, but this is your opportunity to help us to improve the policy document, the brief that we've prepared. And so what we're going to do now is a session in group work. So what we have 8 topics, and there are summaries and policy recommendations on each of these 8 topics. What I would like is to have 1 or 2 volunteers for each topic, and for them to take a table and for the others to join that person. So the 8 topics, there's one on FGMC, child marriage, then there is mother and child health, sexual reproductive health is the 3rd one, disability, mental health, education, work and employment, and migration. 8 topics.
But yes, we believe that there's also like a positive outcome of migrations. But when it comes to the negative, I don't think the research also assess the Middle East who the Ethiopia is having like a bilateral agreement. Because I think we need to also like consider and understand the country of destination of why Ethiopian migrants are experiencing there. So it's different from context to context. So having that comparison between the Ethiopian government having that the bilateral agreement versus those, I think that can also feed in terms of like, you know, like enhancing the research finding. And I think yes, there's like internal migration, and especially children are exposed for different like domestic work. But I think especially they mentioned that they transition from the rural to urban to migrate to the Middle East. But there is like the government initiative by the Minister of Women and Social Affairs, by the Minister of Labor Skill, in terms of how we can protect these children who are working in a private household. So how can we interlink, especially those children who are migrating from the rural part of Ethiopia, who are ready like to be like potential migrant to migrate to the Middle East. So there is like shallow in terms of like how this internal migration is affecting children, and especially girls. So thank you.
ሳፖርት ከተደረገለት አስፈላጊ ኢንፍራስትራክቸር አስፈላጊ የመምህር ጥራት ያለው መምህር አስፈላጊ ኢንቫይሮንመንት ከተደረገለት መማር ይችላል መውደቅ አይችልም ስለዚህ እኔ ብዙ ጊዜ ምለው አለኝ ሶሪ ተማሪው ሳይሆን የወደቀው ሲስተሙ ነው የወደቀው የሚል እምነት አለኝ ፐርሰናል እንትን ከዛ በኤክስፓንሽን ላይ ያለው ሪስክ ደግሞ there is ዌስቴጅ ልክ ቅድም እንደተባለው ሌበር ማርኬት እና ኤዱኬሽን አላይን እንዲያደርጉ ጥናት ሳይደረግ ሲምፕሊ ኢንሮልመንት እና ግራጁዌሽን ብቻ ላይ ፎከስ በማድረጋችን ብዙ ግራጁዌትስ አንኢምፕሎይድ ይሆናሉ አሁን ትምህርት ሚኒስቴር በሌላ ሳብጀክት ግራጁዌት ያደረጉ ተማሪዎች ማለት ግራጁዌቶች ሰብስቦ ስልጠና በመስጠት ወደ መምህርነት ሊያስገባ እየሰራ ደብል ዌስቴጅ ነው ለኔ መጀመሪያ ላይ መስራት ያስፈልግ ነበርና ደግሞ ኤክስፓንሽኑ አሁን ፖሊሲውን ሊሚት ያደርገዋል የሚል እምነት አለኝ ያን ለማስቀመጥ እስቲ ሌሎች ግን በሙሉ ኤግዚስቲንግ ሆናቸው እነዚህ ከአንድና ከሶስት በስተቀር ያልናቸው ሌሎቹ ኦሬዲ ኢምፕሊመንት በመደረግ ላይ ያሉ ናቸው ነገር ግን መጠናከር አለባቸው አሁን በተለይ የቲቬት ሲስተም የሚለው ቲቬትም እኮ በቴክኒካል ፕሮፌሽናል ኤጁኬሽን እና ትሬኒንግ ሰልጥነው ብዙ ስራ የሌላቸው ልጆች አሉ ጎበዝ የሆኑ አጋጣሚ የሚያገኙ የራሳቸው ስራ ኢንተርፕሬነርስ ሆነው ይሰራሉ ብዙ ግን መንገድ ላይ ጫት ሲቅሙ ሲጋራ ሲያጨሱ ነው ለምንድነው እንደዛ የሆነበት ምክንያት ሲሰለጥኑ ከሰለጠኑ በኋላ የሚገቡበት ቦታ ዲፋይን ባለመደረጉ ወይም ደግሞ ኢንዲኬት ባለመደረጉ ይህንን ኢንትሮዲዩስ ያደረግነው እኛ በብዛት ከውጭ ሀገር ቢሆንም ሜይንሊ የጀርመን ዱዋል ሲስተም የሚባል አለ ቱተር ለርን ትሬኒንግ ፕሌስስ አለ ትምህርት ቤት ውስጥ ይማራል ከዛ ደግሞ ኢኮኖሚክ ሴክተር ውስጥ ሄዶ ጸጉር ቤትም ይሁን ካፌም ይሁን ፋብሪካም ይሁን ትምህርት ቤትም ይሁን በተመደበበት በተግባር ይማራል ማለት ነው ስለዚህ ትምህርት ላይ ያለ የት እንደሚገባ ያውቃል ግራጁዌት ካደረገ በኋላ ደግሞ ኢኮኖሚው ሰፖርት ያደርጋልና ይሄ ሚስማች እንዲታረም መሰራት አለበት የሚል ፐርሰናል ኦፒኒየን
ነው የደረሰው ይሄ የማይሆን ከሆነ ደግሞ ዩዝ ሌቨሩን አብዞርቭ ለማድረግ የሚያስችል ነገር እዚህ ጋር wishful ይሄ blanket advice እንዳይሆንብን ነው ይሄ recommendation we have to be specific enough so that we will come up with a workable solution for our problems workable አይሆንም ይሄኛው blanket opinion ነው የሚሆነው
ስለዚህ እንትን ሪፋይል አድርገው
ገብቶናል
ግልጽ ነው አይደለ
ለኔ ገብቶናል
treating the issue beyond the conventional
እኔ የገባኝ ምንድነው የገባኝ ቻይልድ ማሬጅን በሚመለከት ተቀባይነት ያላቸው ጥሩ ባህሎችን promote በማድረግ
Are we only talking about legal path or are we really talking about the legal protection also happening in there in the country? Yeah. If we're okay, simple paperwork, okay, then that's it. And we don't know where they are and we can't trust them. Yeah. So yeah. And I think legal migration pathways to the extent also with the legal protection happening in the destination. Yeah. That's what I can say. Yeah.
One of the things that disagree is their study is more of academic type. If they move into action-oriented research, where they are involving policymakers, practitioners, beneficiaries, change their approaches. Otherwise, what I see here is as if they are doing it for the sake of publication, and what we are doing in universities, in academics, and the scenario is getting changed. Even universities we are moving to incorporate others. I think that's a missing link.
It should be even the universities to add to that. They are moving from this status quo traditional way of doing business to incorporating the line ministries. Exactly. When they do research, when they design curriculum, even training and consultancy. So that's the new approach, the way forward. But when it comes to this thing, we have said a lot. I would like to oblige you to, in the interest of time, we have to reflect on the third question.
ተጨማሪ ስለ ሰርቪስ ፕሮቪዥን አይደለ ሲባል የነበረው ከአክሰስ ውጪ ሰርቪስ ፕሮቪዥን ስለተባለ ለምሳሌ ሰርቪስ ዴሊቨር ስናደርግ ለምሳሌ ዶሜስቲክ ፋይናንሲንግን ፕሮሞት ማድረግ ቢቻል የሚል አንድ ሪኮመንዴሽን ብንጨምርበት domestic financing ምክንያቱም አሁን ያለው ግሎባል እንትኑ ያ አይደለም እሱ አንዱ ስትሬት ፕሮሞት ማድረግ ብቻ አንደኛው ሪኮመንዴሽን ኮምፕሊመንት ያደርጋል domestic
organizing them without any affiliation and then
also like any last training.
Yes. So guys, we've only got a couple more minutes. So does anyone got you wanted to say something?
No, I still agree about the small business because there is a lot of NGOs that will do that.
Yeah.
So single moms or women, them and they give them like small achievements.
ሴትን ጻፊ ማድረግን አልወድም ትራዲሽናል እንትን ስለሆነ ቢሆንም እንግዲህ እሷ ትሆናለች ኮምፒውተር ላይ ተዘጋጅታ ለፊት ያለው ላይ
I know you somewhere.
Thank you very much.
ለመጀመሪያ አሁን አንቺ አግሪ አርፈሻል አሁን ካን
some activities. So if these research groups have looked into that, recommendations and also some documents and come up with concrete policy recommendations that fit into that system. That is something that I can working group for migration.
Excellencies, distinguished representatives of Irish Aid and FCDO, representatives of Government of Ethiopia, development partner, colleagues and researchers. As we conclude this launch of Young Life Qualitative Round 6 report, allow me to briefly highlight the policy implications emerging from today's discussion. The evidence presented today confirms that Ethiopian youth are navigating a period of compounded shocks, conflict, pandemic, disruption, inflation, and institutional instability have not occurred sequentially, but they have overlapped. The result is cumulative stress on education system, labor market, health services, and household coping mechanisms. The key policy message from this round is that crises do not affect youth outcomes in isolation. They interact across sectors. Education disruption translates into labor market entry. Economic strain, increased risk of early marriage and school dropout. Reduced income and uncertainty affects mental health and psychological well-being. Youth with disabilities and young women face heightened vulnerability within these intersecting pressures. This suggests that some policy consideration. First, youth policy must be system-based rather than sector-based. Education reform, employment strategy, social protection, gender policy, health programming must be aligned. Fragmented response risks reinforcing inequality rather than reducing them. Second, psychological well-being requires strong institutional integration. Mental health concerns among young people are no longer peripheral issues. They affect productivity, learning outcome, social cohesion, and long-term human capital formation. Preventive and community-based support mechanisms need scaling within existing service frameworks. Third, translation from education to work requires urgent attention. Evidence today shows that increased uncertainty in the labor market. Technical and vocational training, entrepreneurship support, labor market intermediation needs to be coordinated and data-informed. Young Life provides a unique longitudinal evidence based on this report. Because we have tracked the same individual over many years, we can observe how early disadvantage translates into later vulnerability. This allows government to anticipate risk and design protective intervention rather than reactive ones. I would also emphasize that resilience observed among young people should not be interpreted as a system adequacy. Individual coping strategy cannot substitute for institutional protection and opportunity creation. On behalf of Young Life, I wish to express appreciation to our government counterparts for their continued engagement with evidence. Policy uptake is strongest where dialogue between researchers and ministry remains open and constructive. We also acknowledge the sustained support for our development partners, including Irish Aid and FCDO. Longitudinal research requires long-term commitment. The stability of this support has enabled Ethiopia to maintain one of the most robust youth evidence platforms in this region. Finally, I would like to recognize the Young Life Ethiopia research team. Their work ensures that youth experience are documented rigorously and translated responsibly in policy dialogue. The findings presented today should inform medium and long-term national planning process. Investment in youth human capital, protecting vulnerable groups, and strengthening institutional coordination are not short-term expenditure. They are foundational investment in Ethiopia's social and economic stability. With that, I thank you for all your participation in continued collaboration between government, research, and development partners as we translate this evidence into actionable policy. Thank you very much for listening.